Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the April edition of the SAS Viya Release Highlight Show. I'm your host, Anna Brown, and today we'll get the updates on the latest and greatest of SAS Viya version 2020.1.4. We'll take a look at things like how you can more easily transfer chatbots across environments in SAS Conversation Designer. We'll see how SAS Visual Analytics can find outliers in your data. We'll see how you can now use Mann-Kendall tests in SAS Visual Forecasting, and we'll get to see a demo of text analytics APIs in, well, SAS Visual Text Analytics. Then I'll be joined by Principal Product Manager Amy Peters of SAS Studio, and she'll tell us the latest updates with SAS Studio Analyst, including a new point-and-click interface to build your flows, and we'll see how you can now import SAS Enterprise guide projects into SAS Studio Analyst. Can't wait for that. Now, without further ado, I introduce the rundown.
SAS Conversation Designer customers and administrators are cheering in the streets. It's now so easy to transfer chatbots across environments. You now have better flexibility in developing chatbots in a separate development environment, and once ready, just make use of the simple export feature in Environment Manager, just like other SAS content, and you get a JSON file containing the chatbot as well as the domain. You can now open the Environment Manager application of your target environment, your production environment, and so easy. You can just import the chatbot, ensure that all files are in place, and finally, you see the chatbot ready to go in the production environment. Hope this is added incentive to develop more chatbots with SAS Conversation Designer.
In this release of SAS Information Governance, we have 4 new features. Information privacy, where users can now look at the table level, all the semantics that's part of columns in the table. There are 3 categories of information privacy: sensitive, private, and candidate. Second, time period cover, the minimum and the maximum time period, the dates across all the columns in this table. And the third is the area covered. Again, this is similar to time period, but the geographic values across all the columns in this table, such as countries, states, cities, so you could look at the overview in the table level. And the fourth, multiple locale support. Now admins can select locales across the globe to semantically identify field content and field name for columns in the tables. This is part of the SAS QKB, the Quality Knowledge Base. Let's say I'm a data steward or business user looking for retail data. I'm on the homepage information catalog. I can use the search to look at the retail data. I'm going to just use the free-form text to identify the list of retail data that I can discover. I can see that there is a random retail demo table. I'm going to click on that. And right off the bat, I can see top level summary or overview information, such as the information privacy, with sensitive, private, and candidate semantics that's identified as part of all the columns in this table. And then the second one is the time period covered, which is the minimum and maximum dates across all the columns in this table. And the area covered, similar to time period, it provides information to the users of geographic values across all columns in this table. We can also look at additional information about the area covered, such as countries, state, province, or cities, to know more about how the table values are set up.
So starting with the usability feature, here we have a list control. The capability that's added here is support for the select all option. So you simply, as a user, you click select all and all of the items in your list are selected. Similarly, clear select. So it's really nice usability capability there. Moving to interpretability of your data and understanding more about your data. Here we have an automated explanation object that I've created that shows the characteristics of write-off risk. Write-off risk is a measure in our data, and we see in the natural language generated description there are 3 cases that might be outliers. So outliers have been detected, and they have the write-off risk greater than or equal to 0.58. Some really good information there that you may not have known about your data. Want to explore a little more deeply? You simply expand the object, go to the Anomalies tab, and you can see these 3 write-off risk items and why they were flagged as being anomalous. These are all 3 higher than normal. So looking at next step, we look at the categorical explanation. So here we have an automated explanation object of a categorical variable in our data, state. Here we have Louisiana is the most common state value, much more common than other states, representing 4%. Rhode Island, Nebraska, North Dakota, and 2 others are much less common. This is the way that we explain outliers or anomalies with categorical values. And again, you maximize the object, go to the Anomalies tab, and you see the 6 outliers or anomalies in your data and the reason why they were chosen as anomalies. You see 5 of these have low frequency in your data, and 1 has a very high frequency in your data. So okay, great. So now moving to the third category, which is localization. And here we see Danish translation of the natural language generated text in our automated explanation object. Same thing for Swedish. Here we have Norwegian. And here we have Dutch. So I hope all of these great new capabilities in this release are going to make you very happy, because I think there's some really cool stuff in visual analytics and more interesting things coming every month. Thanks.
In this release, we are introducing the Mann-Kendall and seasonal Mann-Kendall tests in the time series analysis, or TSA package, that is used within the TS model procedure. These non-parametric Mann-Kendall tests are commonly employed to detect monotonic trends in series of environmental data, climate data, or hydrological data. They can also play an important role in automatic feature extraction. This is available as a programming-only option at this point. In addition, and in the spirit of continuous delivery, we present 2 enhancements to the series analysis capabilities in the interactive modeling node that we originally introduced last month. The first enhancement adds reference axes and labels to the thumbnail plots, providing better context for the plot. The second enhancement is when a series analysis tile is added to the canvas and it fails. The log information for that tile is now available to view. This can help users troubleshoot any issues. For this release, I'm also going to highlight a usability enhancement in the Model Studio interface. With this release, the toast message styling is modified to make them more visible for users. Since this is a Model Studio capability, it affects visual forecasting, visual data mining and machine learning, and visual text analytics.
Great news! You now have a new way to deploy your text analytics models. Categories and concepts models are now publishable to microanalytics services or MAS, enabling you to use a REST API to classify or extract information from text, real-time, on-demand, and embedded in your web applications. For you, this means that you can make decisions faster and be able to address customer reviews, customer feedback, and any other form of text input in a faster and more simplified way. For example, upon receiving feedback on a particular service, a text analytics model is used to categorize that particular feedback, and based on that category, an appropriate offer is assigned on the spot. The benefits of such direct deployment channels means that you don't have to rely on just batch programs run according to a predefined schedule, and also your model ops team can provide you reliable model governance for your text analytics models. Please also note that this is a reflection of the benefits provided by our integrated platform with seamless handoff from visual text analytics to model manager, which is required to publish these models. Another convenience, we've also provided you 2 new programming actions to pre-process your text data better. One action helps you validate unique IDs that you may have in your text data, while the other, should you need it, generates a new unique ID for you. Have fun with your text analytics models. See you next month.
What a great round of updates, Sundaresh. Indeed, customers are dancing in the streets about those updates for SAS Conversation Designer. Listen, this was just a taste of the updates from the previous month. And if you want to dig into any of the specific products, check out the resources below in the description box. And while you're at it, and if you're enjoying the show, smash the like button and give us that feedback. Also, if you're tooling around on the SAS Users YouTube channel, I think a couple of weeks ago, a tutorial on how to use SAS Information Catalog was posted. So check that one out if you're interested. Now, I'd like to move into the section we call of the show Release Talk, where we get to take a deep dive into one particular product that had some notable updates in SAS Viya, and that product is SAS Studio. I am joined by Principal Product Manager Amy Peters of SAS Studio, and she's going to tell us about the latest and greatest with SAS Studio Analyst. Amy, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about SAS Studio, but you know that already. Yay.
Absolutely. In fact, I've heard you talk about it for years as being a robust programming interface on SAS 9. Now, tell me how that looks different in SAS Viya.
So when Studio was released, it was released in 9.4, and we had 2 huge goals. One was to make a modern programming experience for folks who are writing SAS code. And 2, there are lots and lots of reasons now why people aren't able to deal with desktop applications. And so Studio is a browser-based app, and the ability for an administrator to centrally manage it, for the user to be able to use it from wherever they want, or just maybe it's some sort of cloud implementation where you just don't have a desktop anymore. And so moving into the Viya world, those 2 reasons are still incredibly important, but it's even actually more, because what we're doing with Studio is really centralizing a lot of the functionality that was kind of spread out among multiple desktop applications like SAS Enterprise Guide or SAS Data Integration Studio, where they all had their strengths, but you ended up in many cases having to move between apps to get something done. And so with Studio, what we're doing is really consolidating it all, kind of a one-stop shop, if you will. And so if it's okay, I would just love to show you it. Can I just demo the stuff for you?
Absolutely. Would love to see that.
Great. So what we're looking at is SAS Studio, and it hopefully to a lot of folks looks familiar because really the interface we made on purpose for it to look like version 9, the same as it looks in Viya. So it should be an easy transition. And for folks who like to program, that's still there. So basically you can code to your heart's content, and get rid of this if this bothers you. But we don't really want to talk about programming so much. What we want to talk about is the flows and some of the stuff that's new. So in previous demos, we did talk about building a flow for folks who like to visually see what's going on both with their data and with their processing. So let me just really quickly set one up here. So let's just find an easy data set like class. That one will work.
Okay.
Let's add a query to it. And so basically, let's just make this a little prettier. So this, again, is something that's not new. We've seen this in earlier demos where we've got more of a point and click way of doing stuff, right? So the query builder is a great way of saying, here's the columns I want to select. I can do more complicated things like join. I can filter. I can sort. It's a whole point and click interface to allow me to do a lot of manipulation of data or getting it ready. And so you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, great. Yes, Amy, you saw this before. What's the big deal? Yeah. All right. So
what's new,
some of the time,
right?
exactly. So part of the problem with query is it's really powerful, but it's not always obvious what's going on. And so what's being introduced with SAS Studio Analyst is more of a series of steps to allow you to be very precise about what's going on, which kind of gives us two things. So let me just connect the filter rows step, which is relatively new as part of Studio Analyst. And so the two things that are kind of cool about this is that, number one, I have a very simple interface, right? So now instead of having query, which again is fabulous, and let's subset just the females. So instead of having all of that stuff that I can do, it's a very clear, okay, all I'm doing is subsetting or filtering rows here. And so it's very easy for someone who's, low code, no code kind of comfort level to say, all right, now I can figure this out. So besides it being a nice kind of simple approach, it's also very clear then when I look at my flow to see this is exactly what's happening, as opposed to there's that kind of black box query there. Right. So part of the thing that's nice is, okay, I've got these steps. They do very specific things, but what if, and we are adding steps as fast as we can, but what if there's not a step here that I would like to use? Well, of course, I can add a code node here and do exactly what I want, but having this kind of point and click interface is really attractive to a lot of folks. So what's brand new in this release is the ability to have your own steps or custom steps. So I've already created one. Let's drag it in here. Let me connect it up. And essentially what this custom step is doing is it's generating some ranking code for me. And I've got just a very simple interface. So I'm saying what would I like to rank? And so here are the numeric variables that are in here. Let's rank these folks by height, let's say. And while I'm at it, let's have a new variable that's created. So basically, and let's just kind of complete this here, to give it a table as a way of saying,
Amy,
I would like to
how exactly, sorry, I have a quick question.
No, you can interrupt, go.
To create that custom step, do you do that in the same manner that you did before, or is there a new process to create that step? Or you don't have to get into that, but is that a pretty straightforward process?
No, so it's actually a really good question. So basically what's happening here is this step that I created, I don't really have any control over the steps that I see. So let me go back to this step pane here. I get what I get, right? Whatever has been delivered so far. And so what's kind of cool about this particular step is I can make it do whatever I want. And so let me kind of pull back the curtain here and show you how you do that. If I look at the step and instead of bringing it on the flow, let's just say edit. So once the window opens up, then what I see is actually kind of two parts here. The first part is JSON, and that's what's where I define what I'd like the UI to look like. So for example, I can look in here and see that I created a column selector, and I indicated here's the text that I want to be there to tell the user what to do. I want that column to be numeric, and I'm requiring them to have at least one and not more than one. And essentially then that column selector ends up becoming part of the code here. And so here's where I'm indicating my proc rank, and the columns that come in from the UI actually get substituted into my proc rank code. And so there's a couple of really cool things about this. Number one is I've got total control over really what the UI looks like. And number two, I can make this very generic. And what I mean by that is, so let's go back to the flow that we had. And let's run this flow. So again, just kind of straight as we had before. And if you remember, the way we set this up was we were bringing in class, we were subsetting it down to just the girls, we were then ranking, doing a rank by the height. And now in my result, I could take a look at the preview data and see. So we've got just the girls, and we've got their heights ranked. So if you remember in the code that I showed you, this was all kind of generalized by macro variables. So what that means is that if I've got other data that I would like to use here that has a similar structure, so for example, class fit. So let's not use class anymore. So I'll get rid of that from my flow. And instead, I'm going to connect up class fit. So let's put it in, connect it up. Oops, sorry, gotta drag it. There we go. And so now when I run this, if I take a look at the resulting data set, what we see is I still have the females, I still have height ranked, but it's actually dealing with another data set. And so the idea behind all this is it's a very generic flow, and I can make these kind of generic steps if I wish. And so, yeah, it makes it easier for me to use it, but I could also share the step with somebody else, which is a kind of a cool thing, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. That's super cool.
All right. So if I could just bring the curtain back a little bit farther and show you something that's not ready yet, but we're expecting to release in a few releases. This JSON, which is the way I'm defining my UI, yeah, some people are into coding JSON, but there's plenty of people who are, that's kind of intimidating and not really what they're going to be into. So one of the things that we're working on, again, not yet ready, but just to give you a sneak peek of what's coming, is a designer to allow you to point and click your way into a UI. So for example, in this designer, I might choose, okay, I'd like to have maybe an input table and add that. And maybe I'd like to have that column selector like we saw before. And maybe had a checkbox or some other control. And essentially what you're seeing is I'm using this point and click interface to generate the UI I want. I can indicate how I want, what the value should be or how they should work. And it's going to generate that JSON for me, which is going to be really handy, right?
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the difference between, SAS Studio is the product and SAS Studio Analyst that has all these additional options. What is the relationship between, I guess, SAS Studio Analyst and SAS Studio?
An excellent question. So a way to think of it is that SAS Studio, this interface, so what we've been in this whole time, is an all Viya offerings. And so being able to do programming and be able to build flows, that's all available no matter what. Studio Analyst is essentially additional functionality that is revealed, if you will, or is available if you've either licensed it or if you've got one of the higher end offerings, it's just part of it. And so with Studio Analyst, as an example, you get more of these steps. With Studio Analyst, you get to be able to use your own steps or custom steps in your flows. With Analyst, ultimately, you'll get that designer. So basically, think of it as a superset, right? It's the same interface, not like a change, it's just more functionality. So that works out pretty well. So
got it. One
other thing I wanted to mention, though, which doesn't have anything to do with analysts, but I think is going to be interesting to people, is if you look at this may look familiar to a lot of folks, this kind of flow, especially if you're used to working with, let me bring up another app, something like SAS Enterprise Guide. So for many people, this may be a blast from the past. For many people, this may be, this is what I work in every day. But Enterprise Guide, incredibly popular, powerful, but it's a Windows desktop application. And so Windows desktop applications don't have a really good place in a cloud world, right? That's why we're moving everything really into browser-based interfaces. But there's so much out there, so much inventory. People have had so much work stored in something like an EG project like this. So what we're working on, and actually was also just released, is the ability to bring those assets into SAS Studio. So I can bring in and import, and where you go do that actually is right now in Environment Manager. So at some point, we will release the functionality to allow you just to bring them straight into SAS Studio. But for now, it's an administrative functional. So an admin or somebody that's got access to Environment Manager or the CLI would be doing this for you. And so what we'll do is we're going to indicate, all right, here's my Enterprise Guide project. And I'd like to indicate where do I want to bring it in or import it. So just to make it easy, I'm going to stick it in my folder so I can find it really easily, and then just click import. And so essentially what's happening right now is we go through, we take that EGP file, which is actually a binary file, unpack it, and basically go through all of the innards to figure out what are the nodes, how are they linked up, and do basically a conversion, if you will, or an import, if you will, into something that SAS Studio can understand. And so if I go back and look at my folders, right, here's what we just got, the reaction frequency process flow. So let's open that up. And ta-da! We end up with a Studio flow. So just to remind you, right? It looks kind of familiar. So we pretty much got what we got, a query builder, right? A couple of tasks that do some reporting. So that's what we got here. Pretty exciting. Now, I want to set expectations correctly, all right? What we're doing here in this first phase is everything that comes over that's executable is going to come over as a code node. And so that query builder that was in the Enterprise Guide project gets converted into a SAS program node with the query code in it. Same with what we did with our bar chart and our proc freak. But what ultimately we're going to do, I mean, there is a query builder in Studio, so we want to be able to take that query the way it looked in EG and bring it up into Studio so that it maintains that query point and click interface. So a way to think of it is we're going to do as much like to like conversion as we can. So, and hopefully a soon release, when I went through that import process, this will show up not as code, but it'll show up as a point and click query interface with the same settings that were in Enterprise Guide. And again, set expectations. There's going to be some stuff that we're not going to be able to figure out a way to put into Studio natively, so it'll just end up as code. The goal is to get as much as possible so that folks can continue working, the way they want. So really, ultimately, what we're saying is that SAS Studio will become the landing point for a lot of the version 9 assets that people want to bring forward and be able to use in Viya.
Great stuff, Amy. I love seeing the incremental steps the team is taking to make SAS Studio easy to use. Now, would this be an accurate summary statement of the general goal of SAS Studio, for it to be the go-to place for those who like to code and also for those who prefer a low or no code environment?
Totally accurate. Yes. So the way I think of it is there are some hard code coders who just want to do what they want to do. And then there's some folks who are really just pointy clicky. But in my experience, most folks fall kind of in the middle where you start out pointing and clicking to try to get going and then kind of pull the code that you've generated and do exactly what you want. And so really that's the sweet spot for SAS Studio is we want it to be a really comfortable environment for that whole continuum of users. Hopefully the one-stop shop, like I said.
That makes sense. You alluded to some development plans and things that you're tinkering with and working on in the months to come for SAS Studio. Can you give us any more detail around those plans?
Totally. So really the way to think of it is we're going to keep on fleshing out Studio Analyst. So continue to add more and more functionality to help the data scientists, the data analysts, really the folks who are really to do a lot with their data and analytics. And then ultimately move into supporting data engineers and the kind of more I guess, let's say enterprise data management situations. And so our plan is to introduce kind of yet another level of SAS Studio Engineer to satisfy those needs where there's just governance that's required, data quality, just the kinds of things that people need really in an enterprise data management situation. So we have got a ton of stuff in the pipeline and really just trying to get it out as fast as we can.
I hear you on that. Well, we would love to have you back on the show to tell our viewers the latest with SAS Studio in the coming months. I'm sure they'd really enjoy that.
That would be awesome. Thanks. Yay.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Viewers, that just gave you a taste of what happened in SAS Viya in the last month. Again, check out those links below for links to the documentation, to related web pages, training, community sites. Tell us what you think about the updates, what your wishes and dreams are for SAS Viya. We want to hear all of it and more. And remember to smash the like button if you are enjoying this show. Also, if you haven't heard yet, registration is open for SAS Global Forum 2021. It will be an amazing virtual conference, of course, that will be held across 3 different dates. So no matter where you are in the world, you can tune in and enjoy this amazing conference. They have some stellar keynotes, one of my favorites is Adam Grant. He's an organizational psychologist, and he actually co-wrote with his wife a children's book called The Gift Inside the Box. And this book is one of my daughter's favorites, and it's such a gem on kindness. So he runs the gamut in his expertise on psychology, and I can't wait to see him. And you must join me. So register now for SAS Global Forum 2021. But before that begins in mid-May, we will be back at you with another edition of the SAS Viya Release Highlight Show. Be sure to subscribe to the SAS Users YouTube channel to get notified of when that show will take place. And I can't wait to see you there. Until then, bye.